Now that the third generation Honda Actys are becoming legal to import to the States, you might be wondering about the differences between these and the previous generation. In this video, we'll be going over the main differences we found, as well as some of the similarities. First, addressing the obvious difference is the major phase change that happened between the generation remodel, adding a hood to the front of Gen 3, while Gen 2 has that iconic flat front. But let's get into some of the outside measurements that might be important to you, starting with the bed lengths. The third generation is mostly flat on the back of the cab, but the second generation slopes inward towards the bottom for additional length. The length from the sloped area to the end of the bed is 80 inches, and the length from the same spot on the third gen is about 74. Without factoring in the slope on the second gen, the length from the back of the cab to the tailgate is 76 inches. The length from the same area on the third gen is 73.5. Although the bed length is longer on the second gen model, the third gen does have the wider bed by about 3 inches. Gen 3 also has the longer wheelbase at 96 inches. Gen 2 is at 75. Lastly, for outer measurements, we found that the third gen is longer in total length from front to back by about 8 inches. This is due to the overall size of the cab being larger than its previous generation. Moving inside the cab, Gen 3 is more spacious and maybe a bit more comfortable with a slightly wider seating area and taller roof. Measuring from seat to seat and seat to roof, the third gen is 48 inches wide, 38 inches tall. The second gen is 46.5 wide and 37 inches tall. The interior is of course more dated and boxy inside Gen 2, with a more squarish designed dash and cubbies. It uses old-fashioned slider controls and the cluster is analog. With Gen 3, the interior has been marginally updated. The dash and cubbies are designed with softer, rounder edges. The dashboard has knob-style controls, and the cluster is digital. The second Gen Acty has fixed back seating, whereas Gen 3 can be tilted forward for storing small items. Both generations have a foldable passenger seat. The third gen seat is supported by a bar, whereas Gen 2's seat is supported by the top of the strut tower. It also has a storage net. Another difference between these two generations is that the third gen came with airbags. However, Gen 2 didn't have this option. An additional tally on the side of comfort and convenience goes to Gen 3 for ease of entering and exiting the vehicle. The second Gen Acty seat rests over the front wheel, so the chassis cuts into the doorway space, narrowing your entrance room. On the third gen, you get the full span of the doorway, which gives you more legroom upon entering and exiting the vehicle. Moving back to the exterior, another major change is the battery location. On the second gen Acty, the battery is easily accessible, located on the side of the vehicle. The third gen has it tucked beneath the washer fluid reservoir under the hood. As far as the engine, both house a 660cc 3-cylinder engine, but Gen 2 only comes carbureted and has a horsepower rating of 38, while Gen 3 only comes electronically fuel injected and has a horsepower rating of 46. While we're over the engine, an interesting addition made to the third gen Acty is that it comes with a heat insulated cover that the previous generations didn't have. We also noticed smaller differences between the two that are mostly aesthetic and don't affect performance. The rain guards on the previous generation of Actys are clear, whereas on the third gen, they're frosted. The bumper guards are a different style and are longer on Gen 3 than they are on Gen 2. The radiator spout has also been moved to underneath the hood, whereas before in Gen 2, it was located inside the cab under the passenger side of the dash. A few things that we noticed stay the same include the taillights, the style of the door handles, please disregard the Nissan badge, we don't know why it's there, and the location of the dipsticks, as well as the gas caps. As a final summary of our thoughts, our vote goes to the third generation. It's obvious that it's peppier, it's more comfortable and not as cramped in the cab, and just has more modern specs. The only downside is the shorter bed, which is a big factor against Gen 3 for our particular needs. And personally, I think Gen 3 is also far less attractive than that iconic front of the previous generations. But what it lacks in looks, it more than makes up for in better performance and functionality across the board. Anyway, we hope this video helped you decide which generation is best for you. And if it did, like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.